So if you've been with me a long time, you remember that I have a neighbor who used to let his dogs out at night and keep us awake all through the summer. And I've already had my first go around with this neighbor this year. It ended up in a yelling match that I had to go back and apologize for the next day and bring a case of beer, which it turns out was the magic key. And now he's keeping the dogs in at night in a beautiful way. But in the daytime, he lets them out. It's so hot in my space right now, but I have to keep the windows closed to do this podcast because the dogs are out there. And yet he persisted. That's what they'll say. They'll say as a podcaster, and yet he persisted. Because here I am doing the show. I'm glad you're here. Welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome, John Wright. You are with me.
Hey.
Another sign that this is the podcast, because John Wright is, I was going to say my producer, but John, you're no longer my producer.
Am I not?
You're one of my producers.
Oh, right. That's right. Yeah, you have a whole team now.
We have a whole team. We have Katie.
It does feel good. Katie's great.
Somewhere on one of these episodes, we're going to just get her on to tell her story and all that stuff so that people can know who she is. But there should be little bells and whistles all over the place. It'll seem a little different, hopefully a little better. I mean, the fact is that if you got my newsletter, because we're back to doing newsletters.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah. If you got the newsletter on the first episode, or even just the announcement of the first episode, it promised that we would drop an episode on Friday. And this is Friday. And if you're listening on the first day of the episode, we did what we said we would do.
Yeah. Amazing.
That's a week off in my life right now. But I can record this with confidence because we have a process.
Yeah, we have systems now, and we have a schedule now, and I feel good about it.
I do. I hope it doesn't destroy the spontaneity of the show. But if you've been with the show for a long time, you probably remember the letter about my neighbor's dogs, because that was the newsletter that I sent back in the day that got the most responses of anything I've ever written in my life.
That's so funny.
Yeah. I got them from dog lovers. I got them from sleep lovers. I got suggestions for how I could muffle the sound in my ears. I got suggestions for how I could poison the dogs. It was. It was. I feel like I've tried to. We've touched on a lot of emotionally charged subjects, but nothing reached people like that one. So,
your situation with the dogs, and I think you said that dog's still around.
Yeah, it's the same dog that I'm shutting out right now.
Wow.
All right, so listen, this is a Q&R episode. That's why you're here.
Yes.
You always bring the question
and response.
Yes, and I try to respond, and you help me, but I know that you probably would have a much better response, but it's my show.
I don't think I would on this one at least, but let me give you the question. Are you ready?
Yeah. What do you got?
Hey, Bart, we all know you want everyone to build more loving relationships, but to that end, I'm wondering how
can I just say I like that person already?
Yeah.
Because they know that about me.
They do. I'm wondering how to more reliably judge the character of another person. For example, the other night, I listened to Ricky Gervais make a bunch of jokes in his new special on Netflix about race and gender that only made me laugh because I'm pretty sure he's a good guy. If I trust somebody's intentions, then I can listen to what they say, even if those same statements would seem, quote, problematic or controversial or even malicious coming from someone I didn't trust. So then, what do you think it takes to accurately appraise someone else's character, whether they're a public figure or just my auto mechanic?
That's a really good question.
And I know exactly what he means.
Yeah, I love that question.
Yeah.
Especially, it's funny, even the auto mechanic thing, because I go if there's anyone's character that you need to judge accurately, it's your auto mechanic.
The guy who's going to tell you what's wrong and how much it's going to cost?
Yeah. So you take the car in because you don't know what you're doing. And I say guy, it could be a woman, but in my experience, it's often a guy. And a guy looks at me and he says, yeah, you're going to need a new rotor fan or a new...
Did you make that up?
Yeah, there's no such thing, I think, as a rotor fan. But I'm sure I've bought one. But he says, it's going to cost you $700. And you're like, can I get along without it? It's like, I wouldn't. It's really dangerous. Some of these places, like, they'll show you the part after they've done the thing. They'll show you your old part. But, like, what do I know?
Yeah, it could have been perfectly fine. Or they might have just been saying, like, you know, when they buy the new one, they might buy the more expensive one, and then maybe there was a better deal for $500.
Right. You have to trust that person's character.
Yeah.
And so like, I love they threw that in, but the Ricky Gervais thing too, because in this day and age, we listen to a lot of voices. And I mean, on some level, I'm one of those voices.
That's right. People have you in their ears, and they either trust or don't trust the intentions of the guy behind the microphone.
Yeah. So how do you
and
do
you know,
that?
Ricky Gervais is a good example too, because he's he did just come out with that new special. We know he's made very humanizing content. Afterlife is a great show.
Right.
And I think you've mentioned it even on the podcast before as one of your, like, hey, this is a very humanizing, you know, deals very well with emotions. And I know he's an atheist. He's part of the secular community, an active part of it. So that's an interesting question. Do we feel the same about Ricky as we do Dave Chappelle, and as we do Louis C.K., and as we do, you know? So, like, and Louis is another example. Someone who did what Louis does, or what Louis did, which was actually a long time ago. It's 2005, I think, or something. But you say, like, do you trust Louis C.K. to tell you a joke now, you know? So all of that is very good stuff.
Okay, there's so much stuff going on here. I don't like.
I
know. We don't want to go forever, but I just have to say, like, this is so. I mean, just the words that we're using: trust.
Yeah.
What is trust? Character. How do you define character? Intentions.
Yeah.
It's funny because Ricky Gervais sometimes guests on Sam Harris's show.
That's right. Yeah,
they do a thing together.
Mm-hmm.
But I was listening to Sam Harris the other day talking to this other guy, and the subject of their show was, is there, like, do we really have selves?
Right.
And it was this kind of like, this guy was like a mixture of a neuroscience researcher and a student of Buddhism who's also an atheist. The other guy, not Sam. Sam's probably all those things too.
Yeah.
And the idea is, you know, the idea that, what does it mean to have a self? And of course, Buddhism would say, like, the self is an illusion. It's like a mirage. Like, you see something, but it's like you don't actually have a self that has a free will. You're a person.
But that's like a combination of parts, kind of, or like it's a confluence of things.
Right. And it's a deterministic thing where, like, yeah, you are a location where things happen, but that you're not a consistent self. And they were like, well, even your body, like the atoms that form your body now have all been exchanged out with the atoms that formed your body, 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I guess it's a show like that Severance show is useful at kind of exposing, like, if you don't remember something, does it count? Yeah, does it count as part of your, like, does that contribute to yourself?
Yeah, does my friend with Alzheimer's who can't remember his relationship with his wife, is he the same person? Is he a continuous person? Does he ever have a self, and does he have self? So there's all those questions, like, so in terms of, like, Ricky Gervais, like, when you say, do I trust Ricky Gervais? Like, what are you trusting? Are you trusting him 20 years ago? Are you trusting him now? Like the Louis C.K. thing. Like, some of the things that Louis C.K. said in his bits right before he got nailed were some of the most knowing and helpful things I had ever heard from a comic.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, like, are they all evacuated by that event? And I go, like, what does it mean to trust?
I would say I trust Sam Harris. I trust that he has a generally helpful way of looking at the world, and that the way that he looks at the world, I generally comport with and trust. I don't trust Joe Rogan. Yeah. I don't think I'm going to have the same experience.
One picture of your upper body would show that you don't trust Joe Rogan. You are not taking those supplements.
No.
You are not out there bow hunting. You do not trust him.
No.
I think when it comes to like trusting Sam Harris, there's two levels, at least two levels, and maybe three that you meant that are worth mentioning.
Can I mention one real quick that isn't one of them?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean agree. It doesn't mean like I always agree with everything Sam Harris says.
No, but what was interesting is that when you were describing why you trust him, you said because like we generally have the same point of view.
Worldview. Yeah, the way of looking at the world. Yeah.
And I would say that's one of the biggest dangers in trusting other people, is that trusting that because you agree with their worldview, that you can trust them as a human being. I would imagine that there were a lot of people at the Capitol on January 6th who were standing out there going, this election is stolen and Trump's great. And the other guy was like, yeah, this election is stolen and Trump's great. We need to do something about it. Yeah, we need to do something. And they were like, because they trust, and they were like, you're a brother. I trust you. And then they walk down to the Capitol to do something. And the one group thinks like, we're going to stand here and wait till we get on TV and we're going to make our voices known. And somebody picked up a flagpole and is going to smash somebody over the head. And they're like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And they trusted because they agreed with this person on worldview or on an issue. They put trust in them and they thought like, oh yeah. And then they realized like this person's a violent person who would hurt another human being.
Right.
And I want no part of that. And like, I don't want to be associated with this. A lot of people had this experience in church or might have this experience in an atheist group where they'll go like, you don't believe in God. I don't believe in God either. You know, and let's go get a drink together. And then the person like makes a move on them that they don't expect or says something really cruel about women that they didn't expect. And they're like, I thought we were, similar because we agree on this issue.
Right. But I think you could tell me a joke about the difference between sexes or something like that I wouldn't accept coming from someone else who I didn't know what they thought about women. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I guess necessary but not sufficient or something like that. But like, I just could like, I think it's really dangerous to think that because people agree with us that they have good character.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point.
If we trust our own character, we go like, I'm a good person. Then when somebody agrees with us, we sort of think like, because they agree with us on subjects A, B, and C, we assume that they would be with us also on D, E, and F, and that's not true.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. And I mean, just one little asterisk on the Sam Harris example specifically. He's a guy who actually shares his ethical framework a lot and his moral framework a lot. So you kind of know where he's at on a lot of the things that might come up as regards to an ethical decision he's going to make. But a lot of other people, you never hear from them what their ethics actually are.
No, and the other thing is like you have, in terms of the public figure, you have a lot of points of reference for Sam Harris.
Right.
Now you might still be disappointed if you think that would translate into Sam Harris being nice to you in a restaurant.
Oh yeah.
Like you don't know that.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. And people would be disappointed with Bart Campolo if they saw him yelling at his neighbor. Like the same guy that does the Humanize Me podcast. You know what I mean?
It's true.
About the dog.
You would have been disappointed.
You would have been disappointed. But that doesn't mean that...
Although you would have been... You might have been disappointed, but you wouldn't have been surprised. Because you go like, do I ever portray myself as a guy who like doesn't make a million mistakes and have to apologize all over the place?
That's very right.
Yeah. That's how I stay on brand.
Yeah, right. You would have to also stick around until you came back with the beer,
Yeah, I have to lower people's expectations all the time. So that I can so that I'm not a disappointment. Okay, stop there. Let's take a break.
Hey, I'm Katie, one of Humanize Me's producers. If you like this podcast, you'll love Bart's new monthly newsletter. It's another way to get content like this, a way to plug into the community, and you can get it for as little as $1 a month on Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the work we do, Patreon is the place to do it. Check us out at patreon.com/humanize me. Thanks!
But wait, here's the thought. I actually have a definition of character
Okay.
that I use all the time. And I think it's really good.
Okay.
I think character is the consistent congruity between somebody's words and their actions.
But what if their words and actions both suck? Does that mean they still
have a bad character?
Okay.
What's the congruity between their word and their deed? Somebody would have a strong character if they were like, they would talk like a racist, they act like a racist, their character is racist. What I want to be able to judge in another person is what they're going to do under pressure. What I want to know is what you're going to do predictable on the basis of what you say you're going to do? If you say you're going to show up, will you show up? If you say you're going to take care of my kid, will you take care of my kid?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are two aspects of that. One is, what's your intention? So if you say you're going to take care of my kid, do you intend to take care of my kid? Like, do you intend to do that? Or are you just saying that to make me feel good, or to con me out of money, or to, or to win some favor from me? But you don't actually, you're not going to do it. You don't mean to do it. It's not your intention.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the other thing is, are you competent to do it? So for instance, John, like somebody say, well, do you trust John Wright? And go like, I do. I really trust John Wright. I trust his character. So you would let him take care of your granddaughter? I would. You're like, and you would also let him perform brain surgery on your wife? And I go like, I would not. I don't trust you at all to do brain surgery on my wife.
Right. And it wouldn't be because of a lack of good intention.
Your intentions would be great. You'd be like, Bart, I really want to heal her. I'm gonna do a great job.
Yeah, I guess
John, I don't trust
intentions coupled with competence. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that makes sense to me.
The reason I would trust you to take care of my child is I think you have good intentions with respect to my child, but also I think you're capable of taking care of a child.
I could do it. Yeah. I could do it.
And then there would be somebody who might have great competence. Like Elon Musk, I would go like, he's a super competent guy. And you go like, would I trust him to manage my investment portfolio? I wouldn't. Because I don't think he shares a lot of my values.
Mm-hmm.
Would I trust him to take care of my kids? I wouldn't. I don't know. I haven't,
I don't think I would trust Elon Musk to look after your granddaughter either.
No. And so he's super competent, but I don't know his intentions, or I don't trust his intentions.
Well, and I mean, I think some good examples around someone like Elon Musk are like, do you trust him to come up with ideas that are going to disrupt an industry and prove useful to humanity and push us forward as a society? Yes. Do I trust him with things like having a set of politics that are going to be balanced and lead to, really good diplomacy, good relations between different parts of government and things like that? No.
Right. And so we're talking about public figures.
Moderate a social platform.
Right. Look out for the needs of marginalized people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't, do I think he's worth listening to? Absolutely. Do I trust that he will, suggest things that are worthy of consideration? I absolutely do.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing, but I'm thinking much more in terms of like the interpersonal realm.
Mm-hmm.
Because we meet people and we kind of have to decide how vulnerable we're going to be with them, or how honest we're going to be with them about ourselves. I think, I have a friend who lives in Alabama, who's a secular person, and they really struggle with how much of themselves to reveal in public situations, or even in friendships.
Yeah.
Because the consequences of being judged as a bad person are so strong, and the likelihood of being judged as a bad person because you don't believe in God are really high. So that person has a really difficult thing where they're literally sitting across the table from somebody thinking, can I tell this person who I really am? Or can I tell them that I don't subscribe to their belief system? What's the risk involved there?
Yeah, definitely.
And
no, that's a really good point.
And I think, I'm trying to think like on a practical level, how do I make that determination, or how do you make that determination?
And do you think that people are different when they go into this decision? Because I do. I mean, this was actually one of the biggest points of contention between me and my girlfriend when we first met, which is, a while ago now. And it hasn't been an issue for a long time. But at the beginning, there were just like things that she would say or things that I would say where we would see it so differently as far as like our ability to be open and vulnerable with just other people, or like, how do we think about the average stranger? Is it someone you can generally just let in through the door of your life and be open to and what I kind of realized was, and what I think she kind of forced me to realize, was that I enjoyed the affect of openness. Like, oh, I'm just open to everybody, and I'm just so loving and open-hearted and open-minded, and everyone, giving the impression that and believing actually that I would be friends with everybody and everyone could cut. But actually, there was a very tight group that I would actually talk about real things with or let into my real emotional life and that kind of thing. And I think that was her point, was that like I wasn't even aware the extent to which I was discriminating,
Yeah, that's right. Because you didn't appear to be discriminating, but you were like, I really was.
Yes.
What's interesting is like, I think that I actually talk about the real stuff in my life with a lot more people than most people do.
I think that's right.
But one of the things that I realize is that that's it's a privilege of having a lot of support, is that I can afford to get rejected by a lot of people.
Right.
Because I already have a lot of people on the team, and I'm not like, my income isn't dependent on the approval of the people that I might alienate. And I think that that's a really important thing, is that some people are in a position to be more trusting of other people.
Maybe that's what I was kind of in a roundabout way trying to say about my girlfriend. Like she had some life experiences that made her more guarded, maybe, or made her be more choosy because she couldn't be as open as I was maybe pretending to be.
So sometimes it's people have a history where they've been traumatized by trusting the wrong person. And so they're like, I won't get fooled again that way. And sometimes people just have a reliable understanding of, this is dangerous. Like, this information could be used against me. And so I got to be really, I can't tell people my business. And I go the same information, you really can't, I'm not really vulnerable to you, so I can share it with you.
Right.
It's not going to get used against me. Sometimes people are open and honest because that's their character. And sometimes people are open and honest because they're able to be. And that somebody might be really closed and guarded, and you go like, that's a mark against them. They're not an open person. And you go like, well, you might want to find out why. Because they might be a very open person once they're in a position of safety.
That's very true. That's very true.
Yeah. So I think like we just did an episode 2 weeks ago with a witch. Like, I think witchcraft is bullshit. And
a witch, when you say it, it's just funny to me.
I have very little time for any kind of woo. And yet I went into that episode with a fairly open mind because Vanessa was highly recommended to me by our new producer, Katie, who I feel like I have a pretty good understanding because we've spent a lot of time talking. But actually, I trust Katie primarily because she was recommended to me by Holly Laurent.
Yeah, yeah.
Who's on the Mega podcast, who I've known since she was 19 years old. And I trust implicitly.
But these are all potential points of weakness, aren't they? I mean, the more links there are in the chain, you just have to assume that everyone's doing their due diligence with people all the way along the chain.
Absolutely. So make no mistake, I gave Vanessa a chance. Don't have many witches on the podcast. I'm not really interested in talking about supernatural woo with anybody.
Right, right.
And if you listen to that show with this framework, what you would see is like, over the course of that conversation, I made a judgment about Vanessa's character.
Yeah.
And it was certainly helped along by the touch point of Katie.
Mm-hmm.
But like you say, like, so would you let Vanessa babysit your kid? And I go like, I wouldn't. I don't know her that well.
Well, not yet, but as
No.
long as she continued to be who she was on that episode.
I would need more points of contact. I would need
Right.
more
That's all it
frames.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, we got to, and you go like, but I don't agree with the way she thinks about a lot of things. Although there was more of that than I expected. But I certainly found that the emotional resonance that she had with me was so strong. And I think that's the other thing is that I've encountered so many new people over the years. I probably meet more people in a year than most people meet in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so like my judgment muscles are in really good shape. I make a lot of judgments. People say, don't be judgmental. I go like, well, you kind of have to.
Right.
You have to decide who you're going to get in a car with. You got to decide who you're going to talk to. You got to decide who you're going to spend your time with. And so I have to make those decisions a lot. And in terms of trying to practically answer our friend's question, one of the things I would say is that if you don't have a lot of experience making those judgments, I would say find somebody that does and ride piggyback. Like, sort of like with movies. I don't want to watch a lot of bad movies. So I find a reviewer who watches all the movies, but whose judgments are consistently in line with my own judgments. And then I read their reviews.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And you go like, well, you don't do that with human beings. I go like, I do. You're like, well, are there reviewers you trust more than other movie reviewers? Absolutely. There's some movie reviewers that if they like a movie, I go like, I'll never go see it. And there are some people that if Donald Trump tells me this is a great person of outstanding character, there's one thing I feel really confident in. And that is that this is probably a person whose character I shouldn't trust.
Right.
So I think that it's important sometimes to find somebody who you trust their competence as a judge of character and maybe use that as a starting point in some relationships. Or let's say I meet somebody and I think they're wonderful and I'm ready to go into business with them. I go like, hey, you want to grab a drink with my wife and I? Because Marty has a very, very different meter than I do. And she often sees things I don't see. And I really trust her judgment.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes on the front end,
you're a good team. You're a good team.
Yeah. And now you go, like, but what about with the mechanic? Oh, I'm interested in what Marty thinks of the mechanic, but that's not who I'm going to take with me if I want to know if this is a mechanic I should trust.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take somebody who not only knows about human character, but also that knows about cars.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to ask questions, or with a doctor. I'm going to, that I think that we, you say, how do I trust my own judgments? And I go, like, make sure they're not just your own judgments.
Yeah. So I have a sort of a thought that's about faking, about spotting fakers, because you mentioned, almost exercising the muscles of character judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a filmmaker. That means I put people on camera and portray them, right? And I know maybe more than most that all it takes to humanize someone is to let the audience spend time with them, show a couple of key things. Like in the movie with you and your dad, there's some things that I show about, like scene of you driving and talking about how the weather is in LA. Immediately you're on a level with someone and it's rapport building, right? So you get to know what people are like. And you talked about Vanessa being on our show for an hour, and over the course of an hour, you like her, right? You like her laugh, you like the way she talks, you like some of the things she says. So how do you know when someone's faking that? In other words,
well, I mean, first thing is on that film or that, like, whenever it's produced, like, beware, because
Yeah, when someone's edited
You could have edited the same footage you shot of me and my dad and made me look like a horrible, mean guy. You could have made me look like an idiot. You could have made it look like I crushed him in the argument. You could have made it look like he crushed me.
Well, that's true. And when Bill O'Reilly was on the air every night, he was aware when the cameras were on, and the second they were off, you heard how he treated his producers and everything else, right? So you know that you're getting a curated version of Bill O'Reilly.
That's really important. And like, the more you know about how magazine profiles are written, the less you trust a magazine profile. I still enjoy them, but I've had magazine profiles written about me that made me seem like a much better person than I am, or a much more unidimensional person, or that flattened out my marriage so that it was a one-dimensional thing. And it's like, okay, like, so I'm not mad. I mean, they only had so many pages to write, but I'm telling you what,
it's not the full
when
picture.
I read a profile of somebody else, that's one lens, that's one view, that's one moment. And so I think you got the more produced something is, the less I trust it.
Yeah.
Gerard Carmichael just put out a beautiful, beautiful film, a special, a 1 hour special called Rothaniel, which is it's half comedy and half confessional therapy session, where he talks about like the secrets in his family, and he comes out with some of his own secrets.
Wow.
And it's beautiful, and it rings really true. But like, I'm also aware that this is a professional actor and that it was edited.
Well, and while you're talking about that, I think it's, there's a lot of reality TV out there, and a lot of people watch a lot of reality TV. And that's another interesting thing, because half of the point of watching a reality TV show is to judge the character of the characters the whole time. Like, such and such did this to someone. That was the big drama tonight. What do you think of that? And the water cooler talk is literally, Bart, about like, oh no, I would never trust her because this, and this. No, but you're wrong, because, that's the pastime. That's the whole point of the reality show.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is fascinating, and how to spot a faker. I'm not sure I'm very good at it. I don't know if I'm very good at, like, sometimes you can sort of feel that something is off, and it feels very intuitional or something, but I'm not sure that there are reliable, teachable things. Maybe there are.
I'll tell you what, it's very different when you're in person. And this is what con artists rely upon. And that is that as human beings, we are sort of evolutionarily hardwired to believe what people say to us. Yes. I mean, we are much more likely to believe what somebody says to us in person. So somebody comes up and says, listen, my sister's around the corner and she's bleeding and I need your help. And people go like, okay. We're really susceptible to that. And I don't have the science. Yeah. I don't have the science with me.
Warmth and facial cues, and
I don't have the science with me, but I've read the science, and I believe it to be true that our first instinct is to believe people when we're with them.
Right.
And it's very hard for us to call somebody a liar to their face. Mm-hmm. Or to even suggest, and many times, when in my work in the inner city, I got conned many times. I got much bet. Oh, many times.
Like someone would say, what, they need money because of this, and then you give them the money and
down.
Okay.
Or somebody would come and they would say like, hey, I one time I got conned with a friend of mine, and there was all this junk in our front yard. This house we were renovating. The guy said, listen, I'll, if you pay me, I'll take that stuff away and take it to the dump for you. And I was like, that sounds great. I didn't want to mess with that stuff. And he's like, yeah. I'll be right back with my truck. And then he came back and he said, oh my gosh. He said, and in this case, as a black guy, I'm in a black neighborhood. Guy comes up and he goes like, I really need the work, man. I really need the work. He says, you know what? He says, my cousin had the truck. It's empty. Like, if you give me the money to put the gas in it, I'll come back with the truck. I'll get the gas, I'll take it and I'll do it for you. And I gave him the money. And I mean, like, it's insane looking back at it, but like, it was a man standing in front of me, and to say no to him would be to say, I think you're lying to me. And I wasn't willing to risk being wrong because I thought it would be so hurtful to him. If I said, look, you just look like a no account guy, so I'm going to say no. So I gave him, and he never came back. There was no truck. And what he was relying on was that I would have enough white guilt and human decency to not feel comfortable questioning him. And I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so, I mean, that's one of 30 stories of me getting conned.
Right.
And so, you know, you're like, why should I listen to you talk about judging character? And I think that the only thing I learned is that as over the course of my time in those situations, I started to build in things where I was like, listen, I don't have any money right now, but if you meet, you know, like, give me meet me at this, you know, if you meet me at this gas station in 20 minutes, I'll have it. You know, and like, I would just I would make them do something to sort of be where, you know, do something, or take me to the, but I have a gallon of gas in my garage. Let me go get it. We'll drive out to the truck together. and they would look at me like, oh, you're calling me a liar without calling me a liar. And you know, my thought was like, if you're not a liar, we'll go to the truck.
Right.
But like, that's all I learned is that my judgment was so unreliable that I needed to change the decision making tree so that I was protected.
and like you say, you know, maybe it comes down to privilege a little bit, because it's like, hey, I would rather be, you know, open-minded, open-hearted, you know, and vulnerable, and then be conned once in a while, and have the benefit of all those good interactions along the way. That's almost like a privilege thing, though, where it's like some people may not have the luxury, or may not feel they have the luxury of being so open to vulnerability or hurt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. But, and I think that the other thing is, like, when I think about that particular thing of judging a person's character, I think the other thing is that character sometimes gets caught up with decisions. We think about it in terms of a person's decisions, but I think it's much more about a person's nature. And so that's why I mean, like, intentions are good, but that's not the totality of a person's character. The reason I say that is, I think that there are people that are dangerous that you shouldn't trust with your children, for instance. And they would like to be people you could trust with their children, but they've been hurt. Maybe they were hurt as children, and their sexuality got screwed up, or their sense of limitations, or their anger management.
Right.
Or their understanding, their triggers for violence. And like, you say, like, so they're a bad person. I go, like, no. I think they're a good-hearted person. You go, like, so they're a good-hearted person, so you can trust them, right? No.
That's not the only thing.
They aren't, they're damaged. And so you can trust that they will fail if put under this kind of pressure. But you can also trust that they'll be very sad when they fail, and they'll be very disappointed. And so sometimes understanding character isn't about, like, I'm going to give them a chance. It's about, like, I'm not going to create another opportunity for them to fail.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to put it.
Whether a person's good or bad those are very crude terms. I think we want to talk about, like, what does a person intend? You know, are they good-hearted? Mm-hmm. And also, what is a person able to do? And where are they broken, or where are they vulnerable? And so, you know, making a blanket judgment about whether or not a person is of good character or of bad character, or a person is trustworthy or not trustworthy, like, tell me the situation.
Yeah.
Because I know some people that are really trustworthy in one situation and really unreliable in another one. And anyone who's ever been close to an addict will tell you that.
Right.
I know addicts that I can trust that they would never say something unkind in a social setting, like that they would never denigrate another person or humiliate another person. Like, but I don't know that they will pay the rent next month.
Yeah.
You just can't trust them to do that.
Do you think it's generally a virtue to be trustful?
No, that's exactly what we were just talking about. Like, because sometimes people said, I'd rather trust people, 100 and I'd rather trust people 10 times and get burned once than distrust people 10 times and miss out on the 9 good people in the world. And I go like, yeah. If you can afford to get burned, that's a great motto. And that's, again, like, different people can afford to be trusting in certain situations that other people can't. Like,
but I'm trying to push you to say, would you say it's a virtue to be trustful as much as possible?
No, it's an advantage. It's not a virtue.
Okay,
it's an advantage. Like, if you're lucky enough that you can afford to take a loss. Hey, Vanessa's a great example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't need everyone to agree with me. I'm fine. Like, I'm confident in my views. She's not going to shake me up or make me feel weird. I'm not prone to getting suckered. So I can
take it the other way around. By the way, she seemed very.
Oh yeah, she wasn't worried about me at all.
Not at all. Like, if you didn't believe what she did, or you were going to laugh at it,
no skin off her teeth.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah.
So I was able to take a chance to be really open and go like, I don't believe any of this stuff, and I'm curious, but and she was like, here's and so I end up having this delightful conversation. And the question is my life richer for having trusted her? Yeah, it really was. Like, I walked away. I had stuff. What's the expression? I ate out on that conversation for a week. I had a lot of cool conversations with other people that opened up other things.
Yeah.
I got so much out of that. And like, you know what? If I go to Chicago and like I'm jammed up and I can call Vanessa and she would come and pick me up at a restaurant and say like, look, you can stay overnight at my place if you got no place to sleep. Like, I won something beautiful out of that conversation. But like, only because I could afford to get busted up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it had gone horrible, if she'd ended up cursing me out and telling me I was, like if it ended up like that last year with somebody who didn't end up liking me, and I got a lot of negative emails and a lot of negative messages, and you're like, yeah, that wasn't pleasant, but like, I could afford to take that hit.
Yes, and if if Vanessa had cussed you out or it had gone terribly, you wouldn't have been in a fetal position on the floor. Some people would have.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you go like, is it a virtue to be open? No, it's an advantage. Like, if you have enough money that you can gamble,
if you can do it,
you might win.
This is good. Yeah. So if you can do it, so that's what I was looking for. Yeah. Okay. And
so read me the question again, and we'll see how we didn't answer it at all.
Okay. Hey, Bart, we all know you want everyone to build more loving relationships. I'm wondering how to more reliably judge the character of another person. Listening to Ricky Gervais made a bunch of jokes about race and gender that only made me laugh because I'm sure he's a good guy. If I trust someone's intentions, then I can listen to what they say, even if those same statements would seem problematic, controversial, or even malicious coming from someone I didn't trust. So then, what do you think it takes to accurately appraise someone else's character? Whether they're a public that's the hard part, right? Whether they're a public figure or my neighborhood auto mechanic.
Yeah, it's really hard.
I
will tell you this much. I bet you something that Ricky Gervais said in that special was problematic, was offensive. He says things that are offensive sometimes.
Well, he does it on purpose.
Yeah, and if you know him and you trust his character, I don't agree with you on that. And you might have had a great lunch conversation with Ricky Gervais. I mean, like, I sometimes say things and test them out with people that I'm friends with, and they go like, "You're lucky I'm the one saying that. If you said that in front of this person, you'd
right."
And I go like, "Oh God, I'm glad I didn't." And then I think like that's what a safe friendship allows you to do, It allows you to say some things, to try out some things and find out what flies and what doesn't. And then when you go out in public, you don't make an ass of yourself. And so, that's the other sort of privilege of trust, is in a sense of, it doesn't mean like, since I know Ricky Gervais is a good guy, I know that what he said was good. No.
Right.
No, he might have said something really awful.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say that, like, we've had conversations about forgiveness and we will again.
We have.
But one of the things is like, we forgive people whose characters we trust.
Yes.
Very differently than we forgive people whose characters we are uncertain of. Even if we know somebody is only reliable 3/4 of the time, you can trust that character too. You can trust it to be reliable 3/4 of the time. The whole thing about assessing a person's character is not making an up-down judgment. It's about predictability. It's about, what can I expect from this person? And I think that it's really important to remember that, to the degree that we're judging people, it's good to judge what we can expect. And we have to judge what we can expect of strangers, of loved ones, of public figures. But I think it's really important not to fall into the habit of saying, I trust him and I don't trust him, or I don't trust her, but I do trust her. Up, down, binary. This is a place where binaries are really problematic. This is a place where you want to be nuanced in your sense of what it means to trust another person's character.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, listener, you'll probably never listen again. I asked a great question and they totally fucked it up. But if there's anything you can trust about this podcast, it's that we'll be back again trying another time.
Great.
And so we'll see you next time on Humanize Me.
To hear an exclusive extra episode every month, please go to patreon.com/humanize me. You'll also get Bart's monthly newsletter over there and get access to some great Humanize Me merch. Our supporters on Patreon are the ones making this show happen. For more information on Bart, go to bartcampolo.org. Also, if you choose to listen to the podcast on Spotify, we have a listener poll that you can take part in every episode, including this one. So join us on Spotify. Humanize Me is produced by Katie Johnson-Smith, me, John Wright, and Bart Campolo.
You could be larger than life, bigger than the world, living out the hopes and dreams of every boy and every girl. You could fly higher than the sky, shine brighter than the stars. You can have all you ever
So thanks for the credits, John. Now, is there anybody else we got to thank?
Yes, there is, Bart. We need to thank Brian Olson.
Thank you, Brian Olson.
We need to thank Brian DeVore.
And we have two Brians. Do we have more than two Brians?
We had Brian Lawson last time, but the difference with Brian DeVore is that he's Brian with a Y.
Ooh, that's. Is he Canadian?
I don't know.
I wonder how many Canadian listeners we have.
It's good. It's a good question.
Thank you.
We also
Brian
need to thank. Sorry. We need to thank Chad Grell.
Thank you, Chad.
We also need to thank Chuck Jones.
Chuck Jones. Yeah, Chuck's one of those people who often sends an email, and he's
beautiful.
A super encouraging person.
We need to thank Connie Dollins.
Oh my goodness, that is not just a woman, that is a wonderful woman. That is a wonderful woman and a wonderful humanist who is kind of like being a wonderful humanist in parts of the world where it is hard to be a wonderful humanist. And so it's just such an honor to have her be one of our supporters.
Dave Anfinson.
Dave. Thank you, Dave.
David Buckley.
David Buckley. So we're into the Davids?
Where's
Do we have
Davids?
lots of Davids?
I've got a few of them, yeah.
Cool.
I'm going to go all the way down the Davids. We got
All
a
right.
David Price.
Yes.
Yeah. And finally, David Thompson.
David Thompson, who I actually talked about in an episode because he's the easiest friend. And by the way, I'm not the only person that thinks that. Like, David Thompson's one of the easiest people to love that I know.
Really? That's cool. Yeah. Okay, so that's it for now.
All right. Well, listen, thanks to all of you, especially you, Davids. And we'll see you next time.